Commander Peter Collins stared at the flashing red warning lights on the bridge of the exploration vessel Horizon. This was not how their mission was supposed to go. A simple navigational error had sent them far off course, deep into uncharted space. "Status report, Lieutenant Johnson," Peter called out, trying to keep his voice calm. Eric Johnson tapped at his console, his brow furrowed. "The navigation system is back online, sir, but we're at least 3 jumps away from charted territory. Doctor." Olivia Martinez looked up from her station. "Commander, I'm detecting signs of a habitable planet in this system. Oxygen atmosphere, moderate temperatures, and... Wait a minute." She leaned closer to her screen. "I'm picking up radio signals. Simple ones, but definitely artificial." The bridge fell silent. First contact was always a possibility on exploration missions, but the crew of the Horizon had never expected it to happen like this. "Put it on screen," Peter ordered. The main display flickered to life, showing a blue-green world with swirling white clouds. It looked remarkably like Earth, though the continents were shaped differently. "What kind of civilization are we looking at?" Peter asked. Olivia studied her readings. "Pre-spaceflight, definitely. I'd say roughly equivalent to Earth's early 21st century, but it's hard to tell from orbit. We need more data." Peter rubbed his chin. Standard protocol was clear. Observe from a distance, collect data, and leave without making contact. Developing civilizations were strictly off-limits for interference. "All right, we'll send down a small observation team. Dr. Martinez, you'll lead. Take Lieutenant Johnson and Communications Officer Miller. Full stealth protocols, minimal footprint. We observe, we record, we leave. No contact with the locals." Zachary Miller, the junior communications officer, nodded eagerly. This was his first exploration mission, and he was clearly excited at the prospect of seeing an alien civilization up close. 3 hours later, the small landing shuttle touched down in a wooded area several miles from the nearest settlement. The team wore environmental suits not because the atmosphere was toxic, but to avoid contamination in either direction. "Remember," Olivia said as they prepared to exit the shuttle, "we're here to observe only. Keep communications on internal channels. Stealth fields active and no interaction with the locals or their environment." Eric checked his equipment one last time. "Understood, Doctor. Observation only." Zachary adjusted his translator module. "I've programmed the translator to start collecting language data if we overhear any locals. It should be able to process basic communication patterns within an hour or so." The team moved through the woods quietly, their stealth fields bending light around them to make them nearly invisible. They soon reached the edge of a small settlement. The buildings were simple but sturdy, made of stone and wood. The inhabitants, whom they would later learn called themselves Valenians, looked surprisingly humanoid, though with pale blue skin and large, expressive eyes. "Fascinating," Olivia whispered, recording everything with her data collector. "They appear to have a communal social structure. Look at how the buildings are arranged around that central plaza." Eric nodded. "I'm seeing what looks like a defensive perimeter, though. They might have external threats or rival settlements." They watched for nearly an hour, documenting the Valenians going about their daily lives. Everything was proceeding according to protocol, until Eric reached up to adjust his suit's environmental controls. Instead of hitting the internal control panel, he accidentally pressed the external speaker activation. Johnson to Martinez, his voice boomed across the quiet settlement. "I'm picking up some unusual energy readings from the central structure." The effect was immediate. Several Valenians turned toward the sound, their large eyes growing even wider when they spotted the now visible humans at the edge of their village. "Stealth. Compromised," Olivia hissed. "Prepare to retreat." But it was too late. The Valenians were pointing and calling out to others. Soon a small crowd had gathered, keeping a respectful distance but clearly aware of the strange visitors. "What do we do now?" Zachary asked, his voice shaking slightly. "Don't make any sudden movements," Olivia instructed. "We back away slowly. Lieutenant, disable your external speakers immediately." As they began to retreat, one of the Valenians approached. It appeared to be an elder, wearing elaborate decorations that suggested leadership status. The alien made a series of gestures that seemed peaceful. The translator's picking up some of their language, Zachary said. It's still very rough, but I think they're asking if we're from the sky. Don't respond, Olivia ordered. We need to leave now. But as they backed away, the elder Valenian fell to its knees, apparently overcome by their presence. Several others followed suit. Dr. Martinez, Zachary whispered urgently. The translator is suggesting they think we're some kind of gods or spirits. They're asking for, I think it's a blessing or a sign of favor. Olivia hesitated. The situation was deteriorating rapidly, but she didn't want to cause panic that might lead to violence. Making a split-second decision she would later regret, she reached for her water container, thinking that a simple universal gesture might calm the situation. She stepped forward and offered the container to the elder Valenian, intending it as a sign of peace before their departure. The elder took the water with trembling hands and drank, then prostrated itself completely on the ground. We need to go now, Eric said firmly. The team retreated back into the woods, the sounds of excited voices following them. They made it back to the shuttle without further incident and quickly took off, returning to the horizon. Back on the ship, Peter listened to their report with growing concern. Let me get this straight, he said, pacing the bridge. Not only did you become visible to the locals, but you gave them water and they now possibly think you're gods. Olivia nodded miserably. It wasn't intentional, Commander, but yes, that seems to be what happened. Zachary, who had continued working on the translation data, looked up from his console. Sir, I've processed more of their language and it's worse than we thought. In their culture, offering water is apparently a sacred act. It's not just that they think we're gods. They believe we've accepted their world as our domain. The water ritual is how they traditionally acknowledge new leadership. Peter collapsed into his chair. Are you telling me we accidentally claimed rulership of this entire planet? That's exactly what I'm saying, sir, Zachary confirmed. Peter rubbed his temples. We need to leave this system immediately. Once we're back in communication, Range will report this to command. They'll have to send a proper diplomatic team to sort this out. As the Horizon prepared to depart, they received one last transmission from the surface, a primitive radio signal broadcasting across all frequencies. Zachary's translator processed it, and his face went pale. Sir, they're announcing the arrival of the Sky Masters who have claimed their world. They're telling everyone that a new era has begun under their new gods. The bridge was silent as the implications sank in. Command is going to kill us, Eric finally said. Peter just stared at the view screen showing the retreating planet. No, Lieutenant, I think it's much worse than that. They're going to make us fix it. The Horizon jumped into faster-than-light travel, leaving behind a world that now worshipped humans as gods. It was only the beginning of what would become one of the greatest diplomatic disasters in human history. 6 months had passed since the Horizon's hasty departure from the planet now officially named Terravale on Earth's star charts. Ambassador Richard Hayes looked out the viewport of the diplomatic vessel as they approached the blue-green world. He had been sent with one clear mission: fix the mess created by the Horizon crew. Are you ready, Ambassador? Asked Kira Evans, the cultural anthropologist assigned to the mission. She had spent the entire journey studying the limited data collected by the first expedition. Richard straightened his formal diplomatic uniform. As ready as I'll ever be to tell an entire planet we don't want to be their gods. Greg Wilson, the junior diplomatic aide, smiled nervously. Sounds simple when you put it that way, sir. Nothing about this is simple, Richard replied. Command has been clear. We need to undo this misunderstanding without causing cultural trauma. The Valenians must understand we are neither gods nor conquerors. Their shuttle descended through the atmosphere, heading toward the same settlement where the first contact had occurred. But as they approached, Kira gasped. That's not what I expected, she said, pointing at the landscape below. Where there had once been a simple village, a large clearing had been created. In the center stood an enormous stone monument shaped surprisingly like a human figure. Around it, thousands of Valenians had gathered. "They've been busy," Greg whispered. Richard felt a headache forming. "Remember the protocol. We speak clearly, we explain we are just visitors, and we establish that they have sovereignty over their own world." The shuttle landed in a designated area near the monument. As the door opened, they were greeted by a deafening cheer from the assembled crowd. A group of elaborately decorated Valenians approached, led by one wearing what appeared to be ceremonial robes. "That must be Chief Zorak," Kira said quietly. "According to the data, he's the leader of this region." Richard stepped forward and activated his translator device. "Greetings. I am Ambassador Richard Hayes from Earth. We come in peace and friendship." "Chief." Zorak bowed deeply. "The Sky Masters return as foretold. We have prepared for your arrival, Divine Ones." Richard winced at the translation. "There seems to be a misunderstanding. We are not divine beings. We are humans, travelers from another world similar to yours. We respect your people and your right to govern yourselves." The translator conveyed his words, but Chief Zorak's expression didn't change. Instead, he nodded knowingly. "Your humility honors us." Just as the ancient texts predicted, the Sky Masters deny their divinity as a test of our faith. Richard shot a desperate look at Kira, who stepped forward. "Perhaps I can explain better," she said. "The humans who came before made a mistake. The offering of water was not meant to claim leadership of your world." This statement caused a wave of murmuring through the crowd. Chief Zorak's smile faltered briefly before returning. "The Divine Ones test us again. Your wisdom is boundless. Come, we have prepared a feast to honor your return." The diplomatic team was led to an enormous gathering area where hundreds of Valenians waited. Tables overflowed with food and drink. At the center stood another monument, this one a crude representation of the horizon. Greg leaned toward Richard. "Sir, I don't think they're getting the message." "Keep trying," Richard muttered. "We need to make them understand." Throughout the feast, Richard made repeated attempts to explain they were not gods and had no claim to Terravale. Each denial was met with knowing nods and declarations of the humans' divine humility. Every reference to the mistake was interpreted as a test of faith. After several fruitless hours, Kira suggested a different approach. "Ambassador, they seem to have built an entire belief system around us. Perhaps we should learn more about it before trying to dismantle it." She approached a group of Valenians who appeared to be recording the event. Using her translator, she asked about their customs and beliefs. The aliens were delighted to explain, showing her various artifacts and symbols they had created based on the brief first contact. What Kira didn't realize was that by participating in their explanations and handling their sacred objects, she was unknowingly taking part in a ritual that, in Valenian culture, confirmed the divine right of rulership. Meanwhile, Greg was trying his own approach. Thinking that demonstrating human fallibility might help, he deliberately made small mistakes. Spilling a drink, stumbling over words, mishandling local customs. But rather than seeing these as proof of his ordinariness, the Valenians found his behavior endearing. "See how the Divine One adapts to our simple ways," one Valenian said to another. Such consideration to make us comfortable in their presence. By evening, Richard was at his wit's end. Every attempt to reject their divine status had backfired. Every explanation of human limitations had been interpreted as false modesty. "We need to retreat and reconsider our approach," he told his team, privately. "This isn't working." When Richard announced they would be departing but would return later with clearer instructions, Chief Zorak interpreted this as a call for tribute. "We understand, Divine Ones. When you return, we will have gifts worthy of your greatness. All of Terravale will contribute to honor the Sky Masters." As they boarded their shuttle, Richard looked defeated. "This is worse than we thought. We didn't just confuse them. We've become central to their belief system." Kira nodded grimly. "And I think I accidentally participated in some kind of confirmation ritual. I was trying to learn about their culture, but they were showing me religious artifacts they've created based on the Horizon's visit." Greg gazed out at the crowd of cheering Valenians. What do we do now? We report back to command, Richard said. They need to know that this requires more than diplomatic correction. We may need cultural specialists, religious experts, and a lot more time. As their shuttle lifted off, the Valenians below began an elaborate dance around the monuments, celebrating the visit of their gods. In orbit, the diplomatic vessel prepared to return to Earth. Richard recorded his final report, his voice reflecting his frustration. Command, the situation on Terravale is more complex than anticipated. The Valenians have developed an entire religious structure around the first contact incident. Every attempt to correct the misunderstanding has been incorporated into their belief system. I recommend a complete reassessment of our approach before any further contact. He didn't know that by the time his report reached Earth, private interests would have already learned about the situation on Terravale and seen opportunities where he had only seen problems. The diplomatic disaster was complete, but the story of humanity's accidental conquest was just beginning. 1 year had passed since first contact with Terravale. In a sleek conference room on Earth, Kelly Rodriguez tapped her stylus against the glass table as she reviewed the classified reports about the distant planet. As an executive at Galactic Corp, one of Earth's largest interstellar companies, she saw opportunity where others saw problems. Let me get this straight, she said to the man sitting across from her. We have an entire planet that thinks humans are gods, and Earth's government has given up trying to fix the situation? Steve Franklin, Galactic Corp's legal counsel, nodded. After the diplomatic mission failed, they've placed Terravale under a no-contact order while they figure out what to do next. Could take years. Kelly leaned back in her chair. But there's no law against private companies making contact, is there? Steve smiled. He knew that look in her eyes. Not specifically, no. The rules about non-interference apply to official government missions. There's a loophole for cultural exchange and trade initiatives with developing worlds. Perfect. Kelly pressed a button on the table. Send in Morris. Dylan Morris entered the room carrying several data tablets. As Galactic Corp's top marketing specialist, he had built his career on finding new markets. His eyes lit up when Kelly explained her plan. We're going to Terravale, she concluded. Not as gods, but as traders. We'll establish relations, open markets, and be the first Earth corporation with access to an entirely new world. Dylan nodded enthusiastically. I've studied the reports. The Valenians have minerals we need, crafts we could sell as exotic items back home, and they're eager to please humans. It's perfect. Steve raised a cautious hand. We need to be careful about how we present ourselves. We can't claim to be official representatives of Earth, and we should try to downplay the whole God angle. Of course, Kelly agreed. We're just visitors interested in fair trade. Nothing more. 3 months later, a Galactic Corp ship entered Terravale's orbit. Unlike the previous diplomatic vessel, this one was designed to impress, with sleek lines and gleaming surfaces visible even from the ground. Kelly stood on the bridge, watching the blue-green planet grow larger in the view screen. Remember the plan. We're friendly traders, not gods or government officials. We want to establish a mutually beneficial relationship. The landing party consisted of Kelly, Steve, Dylan, and a small security team. As their shuttle descended toward the main settlement, they could see an enormous crowd gathered below. In the year since the diplomatic mission left, the Valenians had been busy. New structures surrounded the landing area, and elaborate decorations hung everywhere. When they stepped off the shuttle, a tall Valenian dressed in ceremonial robes approached and bowed deeply. Welcome back, divine ones. I am Trade Minister Thyra. We have prepared the offerings as requested. Kelly exchanged glances with Steve before responding. Thank you for your welcome, Minister Thyra. We are not divine beings, just visitors from another world interested in establishing trade relations with your people. Thyra nodded knowingly. Yes, the Sky Masters speak of trade. We understand. Please follow me to see what we have prepared. The humans were led to a large building where, to their amazement, the Valenians had gathered enormous amounts of resources. Rare minerals, beautiful handcrafted items, and huge stores of food were organized in neat piles. These are our offerings to the Sky Masters, Thyra explained proudly. We have collected them from all regions of Terravale. Kelly tried to hide her shock. This is very impressive, but we cannot simply take these as offerings. We wish to trade fairly for any resources we receive. Thyra looked confused. But the Divine Ones need only ask, and it is given. Steve stepped in. Perhaps we could offer something in return? We have brought technology and knowledge that might benefit your people. This suggestion seemed to please Thyra. Yes, the sacred exchange. This follows the prophecy of the second contact, Dylan whispered to Kelly. They've developed prophecies about us now? Kelly forced a smile. We would be happy to explain how trade works where we come from. Over the next several days, Dylan attempted to teach the Valenians about basic economics. He set up presentations about supply and demand, currency, and fair exchange. The Valenians attended these sessions with religious devotion, taking notes and treating every word as sacred text. No, Dylan explained to a group of attentive Valenians. Money isn't magical, it's just a representation of value that makes trade easier. A Valenian raised her hand. So the Sky Masters use these symbols to measure the worth of blessings? We will create similar symbols to honor the divine system. Dylan sighed. Not exactly what I meant, but close enough for now. Meanwhile, Kelly was negotiating with Thyra about establishing a permanent trading post. She carefully avoided any language that might suggest ownership or rulership. We would like permission to build a small facility here, where our traders could stay when visiting your world, she explained. Thyra looked surprised. Permission? The Sky Masters need no permission on their own world. We will build you a great temple market that reaches to the sky. Steve, who was present for this conversation, tried a different approach. We respect your sovereignty over your own planet. We are merely guests here. This statement caused Thyra to fall silent for a moment before responding with emotion in his voice. Such divine humility. Just as the stories tell, the Sky Masters test us again. After 2 weeks on Terravale, Galactic Corp had established what they called a trading relationship, but what the Valenians considered a religious economic system. Despite their best efforts, every attempt to create normal business relations had been interpreted within the framework of the Valenians' beliefs about humans. Then came the message from Earth. Government officials had discovered Galactic Corp's unauthorized mission and were demanding their immediate withdrawal from Terravale. Kelly gathered her team. We have no choice, we have to leave. What about our trading post? Dylan asked. We'll have to abandon it for now and hope we can negotiate with Earth's government later. Before departing, Kelly met with Thyra one final time. She tried again, to establish that humans had no claim over Terravale. Minister Thyra, we must leave now. Your people should continue to govern themselves as you always have. Terravale belongs to the Valenians. Thyra listened solemnly to this speech. Then, to Kelly's horror, he removed his elaborate robe and placed it around her shoulders. The divine test is complete. You have proven worthy. He turned to the gathered crowd. Behold, the divine regent of Terravale has shown ultimate humility by denying her rightful place. Now we must honor her by building an even greater civilization before the Sky Masters return. Kelly stood frozen in the ceremonial robe as the crowd cheered. Steve tugged gently at her arm. We need to go. Now. As their shuttle lifted off, Kelly watched the celebrating Valenians through the viewport. We just made everything worse, didn't we? Dylan nodded. Exponentially worse. But look on the bright side. You're a divine regent now. Kelly glared at him as their shuttle docked with the waiting ship. Below them, Terravale continued its transformation, now fueled by both religious devotion and newly introduced economic concepts. The planet wasn't just conquered anymore. It was becoming a strange hybrid of Valenian culture and misunderstood human ideas. And soon, the Galactic Alliance would take notice. 2 years had passed since humanity's first contact with Terravale. In that time, Earth had made its own first contact with the wider galactic community. The Galactic Alliance, a coalition of advanced spacefaring civilizations, had welcomed humans into their ranks. But with this new relationship came new rules and responsibilities. Admiral Lisa Carter stood on the bridge of the military vessel Peacekeeper. Reviewing the mission briefing one last time. The Galactic Alliance had strict laws about interference with developing civilizations, and Terravale had become problem number one in Earth's relationship with their new allies. The situation is clear, she told her officers. We go to Terravale, we formally renounce all human claims to the planet, and we establish that Earth has no desire to rule or influence their development. The Galactic Alliance observer will witness our compliance with non-interference laws. Professor Alan Shaw, the mission's xenosociologist, looked worried. Admiral, from what we know about how the Valenians have interpreted previous contacts, this may not be as simple as making an announcement. That's why you're here, Professor, Lisa replied. Your job is to find a way to undo the cultural contamination our people caused. On the other side of the bridge stood Zorn, the Galactic Alliance representative. The tall, silver-skinned alien had been mostly silent during the journey, but now spoke in a melodious voice. The Council is concerned about the level of influence humans have already exerted on Terravale. 3 separate contacts in 2 years is unprecedented interference with a pre-spaceflight civilization. Lisa nodded grimly. We understand, Representative. Zorn. That's why we're taking decisive action to correct the situation. The Peacekeeper entered orbit around Terravale, and immediately their sensors detected significant changes since the last human visit. New cities had sprung up. Primitive road networks connected regions that had previously been separate, and most concerning of all, enormous structures that looked like temples dotted the landscape. They've advanced significantly, Alan noted. At this rate of development, they'll have global electronic communications within a few years. Lisa turned to Lieutenant Jack Murphy, the security officer who would accompany them to the surface. This mission is diplomatic. Weapons are for emergency use only. Is that clear? Jack nodded. Crystal clear, Admiral. Their shuttle descended toward what had become the main city on Terravale. As they approached, they could see thousands of Valenians gathering below. A massive open area had been prepared for their arrival, surrounded by banners and decorations. It looks like they were expecting us, Jack said. Alan studied the scene through the viewport. No, Lieutenant. I think they're always ready for our return. Look at those permanent structures around the landing area. They've built their city around the possibility of humans visiting. When they stepped out of the shuttle, they were greeted by an elaborate procession of Valenians. At the front walked an elderly Valenian wearing ornate robes covered in symbols that seemed to represent human figures and spacecraft. Welcome, Sky Masters, the elderly Valenian called out. I am High, Priest Melchior. You arrived just in time for the Festival of Human Ascension. Lisa stepped forward. I am Admiral Lisa Carter of Earth. I come with an important message for your people. High Priest Melchior bowed deeply. The divine messenger speaks. We are blessed. Lisa glanced at Alan, who nodded encouragingly. People of Terravale, she began, I must clarify an important matter. Humans are not gods. We have no claim to your world. The previous contacts were mistakes or unauthorized. We formally renounce any suggestion that we rule your planet. As Alan had predicted, the High Priest's expression didn't change. The third test begins. Just as the sacred texts foretold, the Sky Masters test our faith by denying their divinity. Representative Zorn watched this exchange with growing concern. The alien's silver skin seemed to shimmer with disapproval. Alan stepped forward. Perhaps I could speak with your scholars. I would like to learn about your understanding of humans and explain our perspective. This request was met with enthusiasm. The Valenians led Alan to a grand building they called the Temple of Knowledge, where he discovered to his horror that they had documented every word and action from all previous human visits. The brief interactions had been analyzed, interpreted, and built into an elaborate theology. Meanwhile, Lisa continued her formal address to the gathered crowds, with Jack standing at attention nearby. Earth recognizes the full sovereignty and independence of Terravale. We have no authority here and seek none. Each declaration was met with cheers and religious excitement. It became clear that the more forcefully she renounced human authority, the more the Valenians believed it was a divine test of their loyalty. As the ceremony continued, a commotion broke out at the edge of the crowd. A group of Valenians wearing different symbols pushed their way forward. One of them shouted accusations at High Priest Melchior. "The Sky Masters test us because you have corrupted their teachings," the newcomer yelled. "The true path requires rejection of the false priests," High Priest Melchior responded angrily. "Heretics, you dishonor the divine presence." The argument escalated quickly. The crowd began to separate into opposing groups. Some of the protesters rushed toward the human delegation. "Admiral," Jack called out in warning. Before Lisa could respond, the situation turned chaotic. The two Valenian factions began pushing and shoving. Above them, a large decorative arch began to tilt dangerously as Valenians climbed on it to get a better view of the humans. Jack saw it happening before anyone else. The arch was collapsing directly toward a group of civilian Valenians. Without thinking, he rushed forward, pushing several of them out of the way just as the heavy structure crashed down. The dust settled to reveal Jack shielding 3 young Valenians, the arch broken around him but having missed its intended victims. Hush fell over the crowd. Then someone called out, "A miracle, the Divine Guardian protects the faithful." Both factions immediately stopped fighting. The heretics fell to their knees, apparently convinced by Jack's action. High Priest Melchior approached and bowed to Jack. "The prophecy is fulfilled. The Divine Guardian appears in our time of conflict to show the true path." Representative Zorn had witnessed everything. The alien approached Lisa with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Admiral Carter," Zorn said quietly, "I believe your mission has failed. The cultural contamination appears irreversible at this point." Lisa watched as the Valenians began chanting Jack's name, or rather the title they had given him, Divine Guardian. Alan returned from the Temple of Knowledge with a defeated look on his face. Their entire social structure has reorganized around their understanding of humans, Alan reported. Removing that belief now would cause more harm than good. Lisa looked at the celebrating Valenians, then at Representative Zorn. "What will the Galactic Alliance recommend?" Zorn's silver skin rippled, thoughtfully. "I will report that Terravale represents a unique case. The contamination occurred accidentally, but now appears to be driving their development in unexpected ways. Perhaps a new classification is needed." As they prepared to return to their shuttle, Jack approached Lisa. "I'm sorry, Admiral. I couldn't let them get hurt." Lisa nodded. "You did the right thing, Lieutenant. Unfortunately, it just made our problem more complicated. They left Terravale behind, but now the planet had a new divine figure in their pantheon, the Divine Guardian who protected the faithful. And on Earth, difficult decisions waited about how to handle a world that refused to be unconquered. 5 years had passed since humans first set foot on Terravale. After much debate, Earth's government had finally accepted the inevitable. If the Valenians could not be convinced that humans were not their gods and rulers, then humans would have to take responsibility for the situation they had created. Governor Helen Barnes stood at the window of her office, looking out over the city that had grown around the human settlement on Terravale. The building, which the Valenians insisted on calling the Divine Administration Temple, housed the small team of humans who now officially served as Earth's representatives. Another day in the accidental empire, Helen muttered to herself. There was a knock at her door and Paul Mitchell entered. As the cultural integration specialist, he had spent the last year developing educational programs for the Valenians. "Governor, the new school buildings are ready," Paul reported. "The Valenians finished construction 2 months ahead of schedule." Helen nodded. "Of course they did. Have you finalized the curriculum?" "Yes. Basic sciences, mathematics, history, both Valenian and a simplified human history. Nothing religious or suggesting humans are divine in any way," Helen smiled wryly. "And how long before they turn our textbooks into religious documents?" Paul sighed. "The High Priest Melchior has already requested copies for the Temple of Knowledge. I told him education should be separate from religion, but he took that as profound divine wisdom about the separation of church and state," Helen finished. "I know how it goes by now. This was the fundamental problem they faced every day." Every attempt to establish normal, equal relations with the Valenians was interpreted through their belief system. Every denial of divinity was seen as divine humility. Every effort to give the Valenians autonomy was viewed as a test of faith. Helen's communicator beeped. "Governor, Engineer Cooper has completed the water filtration system and would like you to see it," her assistant's voice announced. "Tell him I'll be right there," Helen replied. She and Paul walked through the settlement to the river where Ryan Cooper, the mission's chief engineer, was showing a group of Valenians how to operate the new water purification system. "This will provide clean drinking water for the entire region," Ryan explained. "The maintenance is simple. These filters need to be cleaned weekly, and these components replaced every 6 months." The Valenians listened with reverent attention, taking careful notes. One of them raised a hand. "Master Cooper, is this divine technology beyond our understanding?" Ryan shook his head. "No, not at all. It's just science and engineering. Anyone can learn how it works. That's why I'm teaching you." The Valenian bowed deeply. "Your wisdom in sharing divine knowledge humbles us." Ryan caught Helen's eye and shrugged helplessly. They had all learned that correcting the Valenians too forcefully only reinforced their beliefs. Later that day, Helen met with Valenian High Priest Malchior for their weekly discussion. These meetings had been established to gradually introduce more realistic views about humans, but progress was slow. "High Priest, I want to discuss the upcoming elections," Helen said. "It's important that your people choose their own leaders." Malchior nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, the divine selection process. We have prepared as instructed. The people will choose who best serves the Sky Masters." Helen resisted the urge to correct him again. "The important thing is that they choose who best serves the Valenian people. The leaders should work for the benefit of Terravale, not for humans." "Of course, Governor. To serve Terravale is to serve the divine plan. They are one and the same." After the meeting, Helen returned to her office where she found a message waiting from Earth. The Galactic Alliance was sending representatives to assess the situation on Terravale again. "Just wonderful," she muttered. 3 days later, a Galactic Alliance ship arrived. The delegation included representatives from 5 different alien species, led by a familiar silver-skinned figure. "Representative Zorn," Helen greeted. "Welcome back to Terravale." Zorn inclined his head. "Governor Barnes, the Council has sent us to evaluate the Terravale situation as it's now called." "I'm not sure what there is to evaluate," Helen said. "We've been completely transparent in our reports. We're doing our best to govern responsibly while trying to gradually correct their misconceptions." "Yes, but the question remains, has your presence helped or harmed their natural development? That is what we are here to determine." The delegation spent the next week observing the human-Valenian interactions. They visited the new schools where Valenian children learned mathematics and science. They inspected the water filtration systems, the new farms with improved irrigation, and the medical facilities where Valenians were being trained in basic health care. On their final day, Helen took them to meet a group of Valenian engineers who had been working with Ryan Cooper. To everyone's surprise, the Valenians had not only mastered the water purification technology, but had improved it for their specific environment. "This is remarkable," one of the alien delegates commented. "Their rate of technological adoption and innovation is far beyond projections for their developmental stage." Zorn observed the Valenian engineers carefully. "Yet they still refer to the technology as divine gifts." Ryan nodded. "They do, but they're also understanding and improving it. The terminology is less important than the actual knowledge." Before the delegation departed, Zorn met privately with Helen. "The Council has reached a decision," the silver alien said. "Terravale will be classified as an accidentally uplifted civilization. This is a new category created specifically for this situation." "What does that mean for us?" Helen asked. "It means that while the initial contact violated non-interference protocols, removing human influence now would be more damaging than maintaining your presence. You are officially sanctioned to continue your protectorate status with regular Galactic Alliance oversight." After the delegation left, Helen gathered her team to share the news. "So we're officially the reluctant rulers of Terravale," Paul said. Ryan looked out the window at the city. "Maybe rulers isn't the right word. Look what they've accomplished in 5 years. They've adopted and improved our technology. They're establishing their own governance systems, even if they think it's divinely inspired. They're using our presence as a catalyst for their own advancement," Helen realized. Whether we're gods or not doesn't really matter to them anymore. What matters is that they're building something new. That evening, Helen sat in her office, writing in her personal journal, a habit she had maintained throughout her time on Terravale. 5 years since the accidental conquest began, she wrote. "Today I realized something important. This isn't how first contact was supposed to go. But maybe we didn't conquer them after all. Perhaps in their own way they conquered us. They took our reluctant presence and used it to transform their world. They're advancing at an unprecedented rate, creating a unique civilization that's neither fully Valenian nor human, but something new entirely. We came to fix a mistake and ended up becoming part of their story. I wonder what Terravale will look like in another 5 years, and what role we'll play in the civilization they're building. Whatever happens, it's clear now that this accidental conquest has become something neither side expected. A partnership, however unusual its beginnings." Outside her window, the lights of the growing city twinkled in the darkness, a testament to what could happen when accidents became opportunities.